Good evening. See everybody starting to pop on here, and I want to be attentive to everybody's time, so we'll get started right on time. In the meantime, if you have any questions, go ahead and feel free to throw those in the chat. And if you would as well, just tell me where you're dialing in from. And all right, so it's 7 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm glad you guys are here, and this is just going to be a chance for us to talk about eating disorders. This is Sue. I'm Sue with My Step Ahead. You may have seen on some of my videos about sharing about this. And this week is National Eating Disorder Awareness Week. And during that week in particular, I really want to do everything I can to help raise awareness about eating disorders. I want to be able to help shed some light, maybe break through a couple myths, and share my story. Before we get started, let me say, first of all, I am not a licensed therapist. So anything I share is simply from my experience. I am an ACC certified master life, mental health, and 7 types of rest coach. So I do coaching, but I am not a licensed therapist. I am only an expert in me and my story. So I wanted to share that as the foundation for everything else I'm going to share tonight. Um, I started a video series last night, and next one will be up tomorrow. Excuse me. And talking about eating disorders. And I want this week to be about sharing things that nobody else might share with you, sharing some things about eating disorders that you may not find on the internet, that maybe people don't have the courage to share with you. Maybe you're not sure what to say. So tonight and this week, these videos that are going to be out talk about that. The video that came out yesterday talked about 3 myths around eating disorders. That is already live. And then the next section of, I should say, episode 2 of the 3-part series will be out tomorrow as well. Just share a little bit about me. I am in Ohio, and I, as you know, already in recovery from an eating disorder. This July will be 10 years for me. Now, doesn't mean that I've got it all figured out. And for the longest time, I was in denial. I am, as I said, I'm an ACC certified master life mental health and 7 types of rest coach. I have a book, I have 3 books out actually, and you can find those on my website. I'll put the website address in the chat here in just a little bit. The first one came out in 2019, and that's the main one that shares my story. It's called This Much I Know, the Space Between. And it is my story because the one thing no one can take from you is your story. You are writing a story right now. You are writing your story of your life, your struggles, and how you are adapting and overcoming those struggles and becoming a better person as a result of that. So my first book shares my story, and I'm going to share some of the things tonight that I wrote in that book. If you are looking to get that book, again, that'll be on my website as well. I'd be happy to autograph it for you if you would like that. Um, and then tonight as well, if this or any of my videos have been helpful for you, please subscribe. I don't want you to miss more content. I've got a lot of stuff getting ready to come out, so I don't want you to miss that. So please subscribe to the channel as well. And then, like I said, a lot of tonight's going to be built around your questions. I have some questions that have been submitted, and I want to take any questions from the live chat as well. So let me start a little bit with my story first of all. So, as you've seen on some of my videos, I'm a childhood rape survivor, and that trauma happened when I was 7 years old. And I did not tell anyone until my senior year of college. So it was a 15-year secret. What I didn't know is the effect that trauma had on me in so many different ways. And trauma literally rewires your brain. We know that from neuroscience. And my brain was not thinking correctly. I was not processing things because immediately at 7 years old, my brain went into survival mode. It was protecting me. Things happened that I didn't know what happened. I didn't have words. And this is in the early 70s. No one knew to ask. It wasn't on the radar. So part of that survival became a lot of insecurity because I felt I needed to be seen in order to have value. So as time went along in high school and then especially in college, I was over involved. I needed to be seen. If I was, and the way I phrase it is, if I stayed busy, I didn't have to think. If I didn't have to think, I didn't have to feel. And if I didn't have to feel, I didn't have to deal with my stuff. but my stuff was very uncomfortable and painful, and I didn't know what to do with it. So what ended up being is a lot of insecurity, and that started coming to play in high school when I started eating alone. And I was on the basketball team my senior year, um, in chorus and in marching band, and did theater, and did an awful lot of stuff. But I didn't have a whole lot of friends. I was busy, but I may not have necessarily been connected. And through that, I started isolating a little bit. And by the time I got to college, I had become an expert at making people think that I had it all together. That Sue as you go to gal, and Sue had it all figured out. And I was dying on the inside. And I remember one day in particular in the cafeteria. And I went to a small college, there was one cafeteria. And I remember one day in there, I would eat alone, another serving the food, that I would be found out. And what I mean by that is that, but in my mind, because it wasn't thinking correctly, my brain warped it out that if I went up for another serving of food, that meant that people were going to know Sue had a need, and the cover would be blown and I wouldn't know what to do because I didn't like who I was underneath. So instead of having that discomfort of feeling like everybody was looking at me, I dumped my tray and I got out of Dodge and I started snacking. And I would snack to curb my hunger. That developed into the eating disorders that I'm in recovery from now. And I'll share a little bit about that in just a little bit. Um, but I didn't even know it was an eating disorder for the longest time. I called it odd eating behaviors or anorexic tendencies. But it wasn't until 2016 relented. And I remember looking at her and said, "Is it really that bad?" And she said, "Yes, it is." So she connected me with a dietitian, and I've been with that dietitian since. And I am healthy now. I am in recovery. I am weight restored, and I'm stable. And now I use my story as an opportunity to help others. So I mentioned the eating disorder I have. There are a number of different eating disorders, and people usually have stereotypes around eating disorders. They might think that, they have these pictures you see about body image and what that might look like. Um, but those aren't accurate because anyone can have an eating disorder. Men and women both suffer from eating disorders. There are some sports that are more, um, I don't know if susceptible is the right word, but more prone to having eating disorder behaviors than the athletes. And it's the point is eating disorders, um, men and women suffer from eating disorders is the point I'm trying to make. And within that, while there are some well-known eating disorders, the ones that get a lot of the attention, and rightfully so, there are other eating disorders that aren't as well known. And you can search those on the internet. There's ARFID, there's PICA, there's all kinds of names. The one that I am in recovery from is called OSFED, and it stands for other specified feeding and eating disorder. It used to be called EDNOS, which was eating disorder not otherwise specified. Basically, what that means is that I have disordered eating, but I don't meet all the diagnostic criteria for anorexia, bulimia, or any other eating disorder. In some ways, it's kind of a catch-all. Doesn't mean that it's any less serious. Did you know that eating disorders are the second most lethal of all mental health diagnoses? Until the opioid addiction hit, eating disorders was most lethal of all mental health struggles. Not only because of the damage done to the body, but also because eating disorders typically are also accompanied, if you want, um, with other mental health struggles, depression, anxiety. So suicide is a big struggle in the eating disorder community because again, the mind is not thinking clearly. The mind is lying to us because it's not getting what it needs. So one thing about eating disorders is they're not about diet culture. And a lot of people think, oh man, it's just diet gone wrong. and then it's not. And I go into this a little more in the video I released yesterday, so I don't want to cover all of that. Instead, I want to get into some of your questions. I want to help break some of the stigmas around eating disorders. So, some of the questions I have in front of me are also ones that I've been asked when I'm out speaking or at a workshop or anything like that. So, um, one person said, let's talk about the mental side, not just food and body image. And that is a great point because eating disorders aren't about food. Food is the subject, but it's not the real issue. Eating disorders are usually rooted in some type of emotional distress that has not been processed. For me, it was my sexual assault and other things that came after that. And when emotions are not dealt with, they will find a way to come out. If you've read the book or heard about the book, The Body Keeps the Score, it talks about how trauma and stress are stored in your body. And with an eating disorder, sorry, I found something. With an eating disorder, um, that trauma comes out. Eating disorders are about control. They are about trying to control something that feels very uncontrollable underneath the surface. So it's about controlling, in some aspect, food. Eating disorders are an addiction. The difference is that with any other addiction, you avoid this subject. So it might be if you're an alcoholic, my brother is in recovery from alcoholism, he doesn't drink. If you're in recovery from a drug addiction, you don't do the drugs. But with an eating disorder, you have to eat. Excuse me, I was doing live. Excuse me. With an eating disorder, you have to eat or you will die. And that makes it doubly hard because not only are you dealing with your emotions, and I'm going to personalize this. So when I finally dealt with my sexual assault, it was 2014. It was over 4 decades after it happened. And I had to deal with things that I had stuffed. You've got all kinds of stuff on top of the original emotions. So my counselor and I had a whole lot of digging to do. And we say we had to get me stronger in the past or stronger in the present before we go to the past. So I was letting myself be manipulated. I was letting myself get walked on. Didn't know what a boundary was. And we had to deal with all that stuff just so I could function before we could even start trying to make headway on more root stuff. So the year that we dealt with it in 2014, it was the hardest and the best year of my life. It was hardest because I had to deal with feelings. And eating disorders and feelings are exact opposite. I have an eating disorder because I didn't want to deal with my feelings. So, in addition to that, when I went into recovery 2 years later, I had to learn how to eat. And that may sound really weird, but calories are just a unit of fuel. They're a unit of measure of energy. And calories have gotten a really bad rap. And the diet culture is all about restriction and what you can't eat. And calories are calories. Food is fuel. That's all it is. It has no ethical or moral value. Food is not good. Food is not bad. We put that pressure on ourselves to put pressure on it. So, to get back to the question about the mental side, there is a lot of mental static that happens because not only are you having to deal with the issues that are underlying and driving the eating disorder, and that alone is a challenge because you've been running from it your entire life. But then you also have to deal with, and I have to face food. I have to face my food fear. And that brings up a whole bunch of other stuff. So the only I don't use this phrase lightly, but it's a mental hell because it's like you're just getting pummeled from every side and you cannot find a way out. That's why when you're in recovery, you're seeking to go into recovery, you've got to have some support. A counselor and a dietitian are the first two. Maybe a doctor, depending on the situation. Again, some of that I covered in the video from yesterday, so I want you to go check that out instead. Um, So another one, and I've got a number of questions about guidance on helping loved ones seek support. And I'm going to get back to that. That was a really big question. I want to spend a good chunk of time on that. Somebody else says, please talk about recovery realities and not just the stereotypes. I think I'm doing that a little bit. That the recoveries is a yo-yo. Is that the reality is that recovery is a yo-yo. Recovery is not linear. It's not like, oh, I'm just on recovery. I'm just riding this rain. I'm just going to be just fine. It's not that way. It's a lot of herky jerky, and it's a lot of up and down and all around, um, because it's a process. Because you are literally training your brain to think differently while you are facing everything you are deathly afraid of. And it is not for the faint of heart. I will tell you that much right now. Recovery is not for the faint of heart. And when you go into recovery, you are daring to believe you matter. And if you've seen any videos on my channel, you know a little bit about the Dare to Believe movement and the critical question around that. And the critical question with that is, do you believe that you matter? For the longest time, I would say no. For the longest time, I'm like, no, I don't think I matter or I don't matter. And again, it's the weird, whacked out, and warped world in the mind of an eating disordered person. And when I started discovering that I had value, believing that I was worthy, believing that my story could even make a difference for somebody, that's when things started to change for me. And it all comes back to that question, how you answer, do you believe that you matter? Because until you can answer that question in a solid, bedrock way, the hard truth is permanent life change cannot and will not happen. And that sounds harsh, but it's true. So I believe I matter every time I show it to my counselor, every time I keep my dietitian appointment, every time I choose not to give in to what my eating disorder voice is telling me. And that's another side about the mental side. Your eating disorder voice. I had never heard that phrase before. And so my dietitian used it. And she would help me realize, we were talking early on, she's like, that's not you, Sue, that's your eating disorder voice. And I didn't know what she was talking about for a while. And as I started to eat, as I started to trust the process, and that's a key part to recovery, is you've got to trust the process. You got to dare to believe. And when I started to trust that process and started to eat, and again, I say start to eat, there's a lot to that as well, the meal plan and just what that took. Um, my homework the first few weeks with my dietitian was just when you're hungry, eat. That was my homework the first week. When you're hungry, eat. That's all. And then eventually we moved up to, okay, let's work on just the breakfast part of your meal plan. That's all we're focusing on. It was very small incremental steps because that foundation had to be built. But what was wild is I remember one day at the kitchen at the office, and one of my big red flags for eating disorder, my eating disorder behavior is trying to come out, is that when I look in the refrigerator, I get overwhelmed with choices. I shut the door and I snack. And instead, it started happening at work. And I was like, no. The key, one of the keys they talk about in recovery is whatever your mind is telling you to do about your eating disorder, do the opposite. So, because usually that's your eating disorder voice telling you. So, what I did, I was at work, and this thing started of getting overwhelmed and everything. I gave my eating disorder voice a name, and I named it Ed for eating disorder, and not for the world to hear, but I needed to hear me say it out loud. I said, Ed, shut up, and then I made myself make a food choice. But what happened was I felt my brain start to separate. That I was able to start separating me from my eating disorder. Because that's one of the mental sides about eating disorders is that we feel that we are enmeshed, we're like intertwined, and we can't find the separation. And that is part of the eating disorder digging its claws into you. And that's why that support is so needed. Let's see, what other questions we got here? If you have more, go ahead and throw them in the chat while we go here. Um, we'll get back to that one. Let's see. More awareness on early signs and silent struggles would really help. Um, we talked a little bit about some of the silent struggles. Let's talk about some early signs. And early signs are going to vary depending on the situation and depending on what eating disorders it's like. So for me, again, I'm not an expert in anything but me. So speaking from my perspective, some of the early signs. Yes, my weight was dropping. Um, I was I was nervous eating in front of people. I remember one holiday, and I was kind of nervous with, how much food I ate and whatnot, because I kind of just, I was hungry, but I wouldn't let myself eat. And I remember one holiday, we were here at the house, and one of my brothers was here, I had some food, but I wasn't eating a whole lot. And he just looked at me and said, "It's okay to eat soup." And that meant a lot to me because one of the problems with eating disorders is nobody knows what to do. Nobody knows what to say. And because it makes them uncomfortable, they avoid it. And for someone to just see that I was struggling, to see that I wasn't where I needed to be healthy, not look, but to be healthy. Um, and that I needed to, it was okay to eat, basically. That meant a lot to me. And it was his silent, quiet way of not drawing attention to it, because that would make it worse, but of simply saying, "Hey, it's okay, you can eat." Um, so that was one of my early signs. For me, again, making food choices was a big thing because if I got overwhelmed, I would just I'd shut the refrigerator and snap. So that was a big one for me was sometimes skipping meals, sometimes eating small portions and then snacking right after because I was still hungry, but I didn't want to eat food, I wanted to eat maybe chips instead or a cookie or something like that. Something's going to fill me up. Um, and I didn't understand hunger pains and the way my body's speaking to me and how to honor my body and listen to it. Some of the other early signs, and again, some of these you can find on the internet. I definitely don't want to get into stereotypes. Um, there are if someone is binging, there's usually hoarding of food somewhere, and secrecy is a big thing regarding any eating disorder. Um, if you are noticing some level of secrecy around food or discomfort when asked about food or eating, those can be maybe little yellow caution flags that something else might be going on. Um, I would also really urge you if you have concerns to contact an eating disorder counselor in your area. You can go to Psychology Today and look them up. You can reach out to me. I'll put my email, my website, and everything's going to be in the chat. Let me put that in there right now. And there. You can reach out to me, and I'll be happy to help connect you with some resources. There are a lot of things online as well. Also, there's a National Eating Disorders Association, NEDA, and they have a lot of resources. They also have an online screening test that people can take. Not just take it online just to kind of get an idea. Is there something going on possible here? There are a lot of resources out there. You don't have to go through it alone. You don't have to wonder alone. But if you're concerned for somebody, um, take the steps yourself. First of all, take care of yourself. Never sacrifice yourself for the sake of somebody else, for someone else's illness. Um, and be informed so that you know what you may be dealing with and how you can help somebody. Because what I can tell you from someone in recovery from an eating disorder is that um, you're looking for help and you're afraid to reach out because you're afraid of being judged. And you're judging yourself enough that you don't need anybody else to add to it. And you're feeling judged by social media, or you're feeling judged by, um, comments in the hallway, anything like that. And the comparison factor, especially now, social media, is just out of control. Then you throw AI in there. Just there's so much insecurity in the world already, and you add any of those factors in, and it multiplies it. And when you're already having mental struggles where you don't even know what you're thinking anymore, and you can't separate your thoughts from an eating disorder thought from somebody else or an opinion or whatever, um, it really gets to spiral so quickly. So, someone who's struggling with an eating disorder is aware that something's going on, and they're definitely afraid of saying something. And from someone who has earned their trust, who isn't judging them, but is just coming from a place of concern, there's good opportunity to open up. Sometimes you got to earn that right to be heard. Sometimes you have to be bold and take a courageous step even when you're not sure. And we're going to get to that in just a couple minutes here about how you can help without being an expert. A couple other questions I had turned into me. Um, I'm going to get to that. Yeah, this one's is I want to understand how words and comments impact healing, and that's part of what we're going to get to here shortly. Um, that that I said I want to hear real stories of hope and recovery. So I hope you're hearing that in my story. I only have my story to share. That's what I'm an expert in, and that's what I want to share because I am no longer shamed. I'm an eating disorder, and I'm no longer ashamed of it because it is now something that I can speak about with authority and something that I can share um, freely, and I can control how much I want to share because I'm in control of it. Let's see. Let's talk about that one. Here's another. These go hand in hand. So let's just go and get this one. So the one person said, I want to understand how words and comments impact healing. Somebody else said, I'd love to learn how to support someone without saying the wrong thing. And then let's see. Mm, so what I want to share, and if you go to my website or just drop your email in the chat, or actually contact me at my email. I'm putting that in stat right now, and just mention resource, and I'll get it to you. I have a resource guide for you. It's called How to Help Without Being an Expert. And it talks about how you can express your concern for a loved one or a friend. You can express your concern about their eating behavior without um, without doing harm, hopefully, without having to be an expert. And a couple of tips with that. One of the big things is don't make it about appearance. You asked about how to support someone without saying the wrong thing. And what was the other one? Oh, what words to use? Yeah, understand how words and comments impact healing. Your words and comments impact healing more than you ever know. And yeah, the Bible talks about the tongue. Tongue is a fire, and it can be used for good or bad. And your words can either bring judgment and shame, or encouragement and understanding, and you control that. So some judgment things, can be, man, aren't you going to eat? Man, you're really not eating much. You know, don't you think you should cut back? You're not eating an awful lot. Anything like that. Any kind of focus on food and eating behavior, when it's food being the subject, being the focus, that does harm because it's drawing attention to something that someone is desperately trying to keep secret. Now, it's drawing attention to it in a negative way. There are ways to draw attention to it in a loving, compassionate way. And that was one of the other things. More focus on compassion, not judgment, would make a big difference. And that is true as well. And one of the things that I urge people in this on this resource I want to get into your hands talks about how to express that concern. Two words, and I want you to remember these: observable behavior. What have you observed? What have you witnessed in this person? So, for example, my brother. at the table at that meal at the holiday. Noticed I wasn't eating a lot, but I had food in front of me. His observable behaviors, I had food and I wasn't eating. His words that brought compassion and understanding and not judgment were simply, it's okay to eat soup. It brought attention to it, but not in a way that I felt called out. I felt supported, I felt seen, and I felt cared for. Your words make all the difference. My brother could have said, "Why aren't you eating?" And then the whole table starts looking at me. And then I'd be like, just wanting to disappear. And I'd be mad because then I'd have to be dealing with everybody else's pressure. But for him to simply quietly say, it's okay to eat soup, that let me know I was seen and that he cared. He cared enough to say something without embarrassing me. So another way, so observable behavior. So what could that look like? An example. So let's use me for an example. So say I'm in the kitchen and I'm hungry and I'm looking in the refrigerator for food. And my other brother is standing over there and I'm looking and I just shut the door. And I walk away and I kind of, he can just tell I just shut down. That's what I do. I just shut down. My brother has observed this. So maybe something he could say would be, "You look like you were looking for something. Is there something I can help you find?" Um, you know, offering support. Um, Now, it's up to me how I respond. But he observed me struggling with a food choice. One of the other things I used to do was not eat something I wanted to, like it's leftovers, because I thought somebody else might want it. So, you know, it might be, hey, you, do you mind if I eat this? Was something that I would say. And usually, obviously it was no. But then if someone then saw me not eating that last serving, say, you can have that if you like. Little things like that. Um, one of one of the worst things you can do, excuse me, is make it about body image. For someone, for example, anorexia. If someone is struggling with anorexia, their mind will not let them see their actual reflection in the mirror. Their mind has worked it out. It's part of the disease. It's part of the eating disorder, and that is why so much support is needed to get into recovery. And so, if someone is struggling with anorexia, and someone says, "Man, you're really looking good. You've lost some weight," you have just validated everything they're going through and made the situation worse. One of the worst things you can do is focus on appearance. Be it, "Hey, you've lost some weight. You're looking good," or, "Man, you must be really hungry. You're eating a lot," or anything like that. Holidays, really big one. Thanksgiving. "Oh, I'm not going to eat now, so I can be bad later." You just put a judgment on food. What does food do to you? You just put a judgment on it by saying that you were going to be bad later when you ate. You have a human need. Your body is designed to be hungry, and food is the God-given means by which your body receives its energy. Comments about image and eating behavior in a negative way cause more problems. Now, say for example, though, you're noticing that after somebody eats, Jane seems to go to the bathroom all the time. That's an observable behavior. That's where in a tender conversation, just the two of you can say, "Hey, Jane, I just want to share. I've noticed after you eat, it seems like you go to the bathroom each time and you're in about 10 or 15 minutes. Um, just want just want to let you know I'm concerned. I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about, I'm happy to listen." Something like that is gentle enough to let the person know they've been seen and expresses your concern without judgment. You're simply sharing what you have observed. Have observed. Those are some of the things. Those are how words make a huge difference because what you say may not be what's heard in the mind of someone struggling with an eating disorder. I used to work on college campuses and did a lot of roommate reconciliations and roommate conflict conversations. And inevitably, it almost always came down to, well, I didn't mean to. And we talked about perception and intention. You communicate with your intention. The person you're communicating with hears based on their perception. Usually, it's ships passing in the night. That applies to this as well. I really want to get that resource into your hands. So please email me at my email address. It's there in the chat. And just type resource and I will get it to you because it has about 10 or 11 things on there of ways you can help express your concern to somebody without being an expert. There's just a couple of the tips I want to share with you. Let me see what other questions are here real quick before we wind up here. Um, Guidance on helping loved ones seek support would be valuable. So when someone is at the point of wanting to get some help, that is a glorious day. That is a victorious day because that just acknowledging the problem is 90% of the battle. I was in denial for a long time. That's why I wouldn't call it anorexia. I wouldn't call it an eating disorder. Until over the course of about 5 weeks, my counselor was just not letting it go. No matter how much I tried to avoid it, I was not escaping the conversation until I finally let go and said, "Is it really that bad?" She said, "Yeah, it is." So when someone is to the point of wanting to get support, that is fantastic. First thing, ask them what you can do. Let them be in control. Eating disorders are all about control in the wrong way. Recovery is all about being in control of your eating disorder. So when you can let someone call a shot of someone comes to you and they're like, all right, I got this problem. I think I want to see a counselor. Hear them. Say, yeah, thank you for sharing with me. Thank you for trusting me. How can I best support you? Just that phrase right there is huge. Instead of, well, it's about time. Been wondering how long it's going to take for you to see the light. That's judgment and condemnation everywhere. You want to support them. You also want to acknowledge the fact that they chose you as a safe person. So being able to say, thank you for trusting me. I am here with you and for you. How can I help you? What what is the next step you want to take? And how can I support you in that? And they may be, you don't know. I know I have a problem, but I don't know what to do. That's where if you have a couple ideas of what okay, so what have you thought about doing? And just ask them, try to draw them out of what they're thinking. And if ask them, what thoughts have you had? And then if they're not sure, it's like, well, may I share a couple suggestions? Ask permission. I know that might sound really weird, but in a tender conversation like that, you don't want to force anything. And again, help them feel in control of something that is very out of control. If they can control the conversation they're having right there, that helps alleviate the anxiety and the stress and the heart racing and the fear that is pounding out of their chest right then. How you respond can make a huge difference. If you're not sure, first of all, if you're not sure, you can reach out to me. I will help you every way I can. Again, go to Psychology Today. You can, and I'll put that link in here right now as well. It's just psychologytoday.com. I can't type and talk at the same time. Today.com. Okay. Um, so go to Psychology Today and search for counselors with by your area, eating disorders, all kinds of things. Um, if you're in You can call a counselor and say, this is what I'm looking for, because most of them have other networks. You can call National Eating Disorder Association, NEDA, NEDA. That's in the chat now too. Um, you can go to their website and call them, and they have different resources as well. Whatever you do, do it together, and whatever you do, let the person feel as in control as possible. Now, there are always going to be exceptions. There's always going to be caveats. If the person is a minor, then yes, you need to somehow get your parents involved, without exception. Um, and nothing else needs to be said about that. But help them feel in control as much as possible. They are afraid and they're so lost and so just petrified. One of letting somebody down. What are my parents going to think? I'm going to fail my parents. What are they going to be mad at me? Is they going to be disappointed in me? What's my coach going to think? What about my teacher, my drama, director, um, my dance team, my cheer team? I'm going to let all these people down. Those are all the thoughts that goes through the head. So understanding some of that helps you help that person get some support. The other part that I want to wrap up on here is it's also important for you to get support. Depending on what role you have with somebody, in the life of somebody, you may be very well affected. And as I said earlier, eating disorders are an addiction, and um, addictions affect everybody in different ways. There's some kind of, you know going to use the word dysfunction or whatever going on. You're a family member because you're like, do I say something or not? Um, she trusted me. Do I break my sister's trust? Do I break my brother's word? You know, um, there's so many different dynamics to it, and there's your own fear and your own maybe guilt or shame for, oh, I shouldn't have said it. Let me say clearly, you single-handedly do not cause an eating disorder to happen. You don't have that much power. Eating disorders are rooted in social factors. There's some genetics involved, there's psychological factors. There are so many influences that converge, and that conversion becomes the perfect storm of an eating disorder. So let yourself off. Excuse me. Let yourself off your own hook. You did not cause an eating disorder, and you can have a significant role in helping somebody else. I've enjoyed this time with you. I appreciate you joining me. Please, even after this on the replays, put your questions in the comments. I would love to go ahead and answer them. The different contact information is in there as well. If you want to get in touch with me, as I said, I'm a life coach. So maybe it's not eating disorders. Maybe you're struggling with something else. Maybe communication, assertiveness, boundaries, things like that, time management, self-talk, things like that are a struggle for you. Go ahead and go to my website, suebowles.com, and that contact link goes right there. So just reach out. You can schedule a 15-minute contact call with me. Let's talk. I want to be able to help you too, because you matter, and you being the best version of yourself and helping rewrite whatever history has been in your life so that you can live the life you don't think you deserve. That's what I'd be an honor to help you with, because you matter just as much as everybody else. Some of the other resources are there. If this has been valuable, subscribe to this channel. I don't want you to miss what I got coming out here in the next week. Thanks for joining me. Have a great night.